Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy daily stories about cheating, revenge, and relationship advice. I always believed trust was the bedrock of a good marriage. Laura and I had built our relationship on it, or so I thought. 7 years of marriage, countless memories, and the ups and downs that come with sharing a life. But recently, something had shifted, and it gnawed at me like a splinter buried too deep to ignore. It wasn't one big thing, but a collection of small moments that didn't add up. The new diamond bracelet she wore, which she claimed was a gift from the girls. The surprise charges on her credit card, including one from an upscale boutique I knew she never visited. And, of course, the constant distraction whenever she was home, her eyes always glued to her phone, her thumbs swiping the screen a little too often for comfort. The real tipping point came one Saturday morning. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and flipping through the paper, when Laura walked in, already dressed for the day. A cream-colored dress, a bit too formal for a weekend at home, and those heels, ones I'd never seen before. Headed to book club again? I asked, my voice casual but my curiosity piqued. The book club, her trusted alibi, had become a fixture in our lives. Yeah, she said, without making eye contact. We're discussing the night circus today. I raised an eyebrow. That didn't seem right. I had asked about the book just last week, and she had told me they were reading some historical novel. Maybe I had misheard. You told me you were reading The Paris Wife, I said, folding the paper in half and setting it aside. My eyes fixed on her as I spoke, waiting for her reaction. Laura paused, her back to me, as she rifled through her purse on the kitchen counter. Oh, right, we, finished that one early. This is the new pick, huh? My response was deliberately neutral. I stood up and walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. You've been spending a lot of time with your book club lately. Is everything okay? I just want to make sure. She turned to face me, her eyes soft but guarded. Daniel, please, it's nothing. You know how I get when I'm wrapped up in a good book. Besides, it's nice to spend time with the girls. You've been working so much lately. Her excuse was smooth, and part of me wanted to believe her. But her gaze didn't linger. Instead, she gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and headed for the door. Don't wait up, okay? She called out, her voice echoing down the hall before the front door clicked shut. I stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door, my mind spinning with unanswered questions. It wasn't like her to be this secretive. Even if she had nothing to hide, her behavior was so off. And that bracelet, the one she said was from the girls, seemed far too expensive for a casual gift. I needed answers. But I wasn't going to get them from her directly, not yet. There was no confrontation to be had without proof. Confronting her now would only make me seem paranoid, and if I was wrong, it would ruin what trust we had left. That night, I sat at my desk, laptop open, searching for solutions. I typed "discrete GPS tracker" into the search bar, my fingers hesitating for a second before pressing enter. What was I even doing? Was I really considering this? Daniel, you're better than this, I muttered to myself, running a hand through my hair. But something inside me refused to let it go. I clicked on a few links and quickly found what I was looking for, a small, unassuming tracker that could be hidden in a purse without detection. I could know where she was, at any time. The next day, the package arrived in an unmarked box, and as I sat at the kitchen counter, staring at it, I felt the weight of my decision. Was this crossing a line? Maybe. But if Laura was lying, didn't I deserve to know? That evening, as Laura showered, I took the tracker out of its packaging. It was small, smaller than I imagined. My hands were steady as I slipped it into a hidden pocket of her purse, one she never used. She wouldn't find it, at least not unless she went looking. Just as I finished, I heard the water stop. My heart raced as I hurried to return her purse to its usual spot on the counter. When she came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, she smiled at me as if nothing was wrong. Daniel, can you get my hairdryer? It's in the bedroom, she called. I forced a smile, acting as naturally as I could, while my mind buzzed with uncertainty. Sure. That night, as Lara slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. What if I was wrong? What if this was all some misunderstanding? But deep down, I knew there was more to it. Something had changed between us. And I was going to find out what. The truth was out there, lurking just beneath the surface, and soon, I'd have it in my hands. But in that moment, all I had was doubt, and the growing sense that the woman I loved was no longer the person lying beside me. The days dragged on, each one a mixture of anticipation and dread. I kept my phone close, the GPS app open at all times, watching as Lara went about her routines. Initially, she seemed to follow the usual path, her book club on Tuesday nights, brunch with her friends on Sundays. But as the days turned into weeks, a pattern emerged that set my nerves on edge. One Tuesday evening, I decided to follow her myself. I had taken a mental note of her past movements, and when she left for book club, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I slid into my car, heart pounding, and set the tracker's destination on my phone. The glowing dot led me toward the upscale part of town, where I knew the best restaurants and bars flourished. As I drove, the anticipation swelled within me. What would I find? I envisioned a night of laughter, an innocent gathering of friends discussing novels over glasses of wine. But deep down, I feared the worst. I parked a few blocks away and slipped on my jacket, trying to calm my racing thoughts. The cold air bit at my skin, but the chill from outside was nothing compared to the turmoil inside me. After what felt like an eternity, I spotted her through the bar's large windows. My breath hitched as I saw Lara sitting across from Victor, the CEO of the rival company, a smug grin plastered across his face. They were too close, their laughter cutting through the din of the bar. My stomach turned. This was no casual book club meeting. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking as I took a few photos through the glass. Each click of the camera shutter felt like a dagger piercing my heart. I leaned against the cold glass, pretending to check my messages while my mind raced. Just then, Lara leaned forward, her hair cascading over her shoulder as she whispered something to Victor. He laughed again, his hand brushing against hers as he spoke. I felt a surge of anger swell within me, like a storm threatening to break. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Samuel. You okay? Need anything? I typed back quickly, my fingers trembling. Not yet. Just gathering evidence. As I watched the scene unfold, a wave of cold clarity washed over me. This was no innocent meeting, it was a full-blown betrayal. I needed to confront her, to expose this deceit, but how? I took a deep breath, knowing I had to bide my time. Eventually, I returned home, my mind racing with a mix of anger and disbelief. Lara came in later that night, a little tipsy but cheerful. I watched her with a newfound wariness, my heart heavy with the weight of what I had seen. Hey, babe. How was your night? She asked, slipping off her heels and tossing her purse on the kitchen table. Just working late, I replied, forcing a casual tone. How was book club? She hesitated for a moment, a flicker of guilt crossing her face before she recovered. Oh, you know. Just the usual. We talked about the book and other stuff, right? I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. What was the book again? The Night Circus. She nodded, but there was something in her eyes, a mixture of defiance and guilt that I couldn't shake. Yeah, that's it. You should read it, you'd love it. I'll get around to it, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I just don't understand why it seems like you've been spending so much time there lately. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she shot me a defensive look. I told you, it's a great way for me to unwind after work. Can't a woman have her own interests? Of course. I held her gaze, feeling the tension build. But I just can't help but feel like there's more to it. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. Maybe you are, she snapped back, her irritation rising. I don't have to explain my friendships to you. I wanted to press further, to confront her with what I knew, but something held me back. I knew it would only lead to an argument, and I needed more evidence before I unleashed my fury. The following days were a blur of emotions. I spent my time devising a plan to gather even more proof. I hired a private investigator, someone who could trail her without raising suspicion. I also made sure to dig into Nina's background, her relationship with Lara, and anything that could tie them to Victor. The investigator delivered results faster than I expected. He sent me photos of Lara and Nina entering a high-end restaurant with Victor and his team, a meeting that went beyond just casual dinners. They were discussing business, and I could see from the images that Lara was deeply engaged in the conversation, as if she were part of their plans. One evening, I met Samuel for drinks at our favorite bar, the place where we had celebrated birthdays and milestones together. This time, I felt as if I were dragging a weight behind me. "What's going on, Daniel?" Samuel asked, concern etched on his face as I slid the photographs across the table. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I watched him peruse the images, my heart racing as he glanced up at me, disbelief clouding his features. "This is bad, man. She's not just cheating. They're conspiring together." "I know," I muttered, feeling the anger boil within me. "This isn't just an affair, it's a full-blown betrayal. She's been lying to me, and I need to do something about it." Samuel leaned forward, his voice steady. "What's your plan? You can't just confront her without evidence. You need to make sure you're protected." "I'm going to expose them," I said, my voice firm. "But not in a way that leaves me vulnerable. I want them to feel the consequences of their actions." "Daniel, this could get messy. Are you ready for that?" I took a deep breath, letting the weight of my decision settle over me. "I have to be. I won't let her get away with this." As I left the bar that night, I felt a strange sense of purpose wash over me. I was done being the trusting husband. The truth was out there, and I would bring it to light, no matter the cost. The following days felt like an avalanche, the weight of my discovery pushing down on me relentlessly. I spent every waking moment strategizing how to expose Lara and Victor without leaving any room for doubt. I knew I had to be meticulous. If I wanted to ensure that Lara faced the consequences of her betrayal, I needed a plan that was bulletproof. I began by researching the legal aspects of our marriage, diving into the prenup we had signed. It felt cold and clinical, but I needed to understand my rights. I spent hours combing through legal articles, speaking to my lawyer about what would happen in the event of infidelity. With every detail I learned, my resolve solidified. In the midst of my preparations, I called Samuel for an urgent meeting. We met at a quiet cafe, the kind of place where conversations could flow without eavesdropping eyes. As we settled into a booth, I slid a folder of documents across the table. "Here's the prenup," I said, my voice steady but laced with anger. "I want to make sure I have everything lined up before I confront her." Samuel opened the folder, scanning the pages. "This is pretty cut and dry. If she's proven to be unfaithful, you can walk away with everything. But you need hard evidence, Daniel." "I have the photos and the tracker data," I replied, a hint of frustration creeping into my tone. "But I want to dig deeper. I need something that ties her directly to Victor, something that proves their collaboration." Samuel leaned back, contemplating my words. "What about Nina? If she's involved, she might know something. Do you think you can get her to talk?" "I'll need to set up a situation where I can catch her off guard," I said, already brainstorming ideas. "Maybe I can arrange a meeting under the pretense of discussing work. If I can make her comfortable, she might slip up. Just be careful. You don't want to tip her off," Samuel warned, concern etched on his face. "You could end up getting burned." "I'll be cautious. I need to do this right." I glanced around the cafe, making sure we were still alone. "And there's something else I'm considering." "What's that?" "I want to turn the tables on them. Use their own plans against them," I explained, my voice lowering. "I want to find a way to sabotage their project without them realizing it was me." Samuel's eyebrows raised in surprise. That's a bold move, Daniel. You sure you want to go that far? Absolutely. If I can show that their collaboration is flawed and that it leads to their downfall, it'll make everything clear to Lara, I said, my determination growing stronger. I can't just sit back and let this happen. I have to take control. The rest of our conversation centered on the details of my plan. We mapped out steps to gather more evidence and set traps for both Lara and Nina. Samuel offered to help me investigate Victor's company, digging into their recent projects to find vulnerabilities. Over the next few days, I executed my plan with precision. I managed to secure a meeting with Nina under the guise of needing her input on a project I was leading at work. I chose a neutral location, a cafe where we had occasionally met for team discussions. When the day arrived, I arrived early, my heart racing as I anticipated the confrontation. I rehearsed what I would say, mentally preparing myself for various responses. When Nina walked in, her confidence radiated as she approached the table. Daniel. Thanks for meeting me, she said with a warm smile as she slid into the seat across from me. What's on your mind? Hey, Nina. I really appreciate you coming, I said, keeping my tone casual. I wanted to discuss some ideas for our upcoming presentation. Sure, I'm all ears, she replied enthusiastically. We chatted for a while, discussing work-related topics. As our conversation unfolded, I subtly shifted the focus toward her relationship with Lara. I know you two are close. How's she been lately? She seems a bit distracted. Nina hesitated for a moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. Oh, you know Lara. Always busy with something. But she's good. Really, I leaned in, watching her closely. I just want to make sure she's not overworking herself. I know how intense things can get at our company. Right, Nina replied, her tone slightly defensive. She's dedicated. It's one of the things I admire about her. I decided to push further, sensing her discomfort. You think she's being honest with you? I mean, she has been a bit distant from everyone lately. I can't help but wonder if something's bothering her. Nina's expression shifted, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. What do you mean? Just that she seems to be juggling a lot, I said, maintaining eye contact. But I also know she has a close working relationship with Victor. I hope that doesn't interfere with your work dynamic. At the mention of Victor, I could see Nina's expression harden. Victor? He's just a colleague, Daniel. We're all professionals here. Of course, I replied, keeping my voice even. But you know how things can get messy in business. People get too close, and suddenly lines start to blur. Nina shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. I think Lara knows how to handle herself. She's always been very capable. I couldn't help but smirk internally. Sure, she is. But you and I both know that sometimes people make choices that aren't in their best interest. Nina looked at me, suspicion in her eyes. Are you implying something? I shrugged, playing innocent. Not at all. Just trying to look out for my wife and her friends. I wouldn't want anything to jeopardize the work you all are doing. As the conversation continued, I could sense that I was getting to her. She began to fidget in her seat, glancing around as if she were afraid someone might overhear. I leaned back, satisfied with the tension I had created. After we finished discussing work, I took a chance. Nina, if you ever feel uncomfortable about something, you can talk to me. I'd rather resolve issues before they escalate, especially if it concerns Lara or our company. Nina nodded, though her eyes betrayed her uncertainty. Thanks, Daniel. I appreciate that. I'll keep that in mind. As we wrapped up our meeting, I felt a surge of confidence. I had laid the groundwork to manipulate the situation further, and now it was time to escalate my plan against Lara and Victor. Later that evening, I called Samuel, excitement coursing through my veins. I think I've got her rattled. Nina is definitely hiding something, and I plan to dig deeper. Just remember to be careful, Daniel. Don't let your emotions cloud your judgment, Samuel warned. I won't, I assured him. This is just the beginning. I'm going to make sure Lara pays for what she's done. As I hung up, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. I was no longer just a betrayed husband, I was a man on a mission, and I wouldn't rest until I uncovered the full truth behind Lara's betrayal. The day of the hearing arrived, an event I had both anticipated and dreaded. The courtroom felt cold and sterile, the air thick with tension as I took my seat at the plaintiff's table. I could hear the murmur of voices echoing off the wooden walls, and each sound made my heart race. This was it, this was where everything would come to a head. As I sat there, I glanced at Lara, who was across the room, her expression a mix of defiance and anxiety. She wore a tailored navy suit, the kind that screamed professionalism, but I could see the tension in her posture. Her eyes darted around the room, occasionally landing on me, and each time they did, I felt a pang of satisfaction mixed with the bitterness of betrayal. I turned my attention to Samuel, who sat beside me, flipping through the stack of evidence we had compiled. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Are you ready for this? It's going to get intense." "I have to be," I replied, trying to keep my composure. "This is my chance to expose her and make sure she understands the consequences of her actions." The courtroom doors swung open, and the judge entered, bringing an immediate hush over the room. Judge Reynolds, a stern-looking woman with sharp features, took her seat at the bench and glanced at the docket. "Let's proceed with case number 1287, Daniel Hargrove versus Lara Hargrove." As the proceedings began, I watched the opposing side with a careful eye. Nina, now Lara's key witness, sat at her table, her hands fidgeting nervously. She glanced at Lara and then back at me, and I could see a flicker of uncertainty in her expression. I hoped to exploit that uncertainty during her testimony. Lara's lawyer, a slick man named Charles, stood to present his opening statement. "Your Honor, this case is built on hearsay and conjecture. My client, Mrs. Hargrove, has maintained her fidelity throughout her marriage. The plaintiff has only circumstantial evidence and a deep-seated need for revenge." My stomach twisted at his words. Revenge. That's exactly what it was for me, revenge for the deceit that had shattered my life. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath. "Your Honor, I'm here today to present evidence that demonstrates my wife's betrayal and the impact it has had on our marriage." As I stood, I could feel the weight of the moment settling on my shoulders. I gestured to the photographs I had printed, evidence of Lara meeting with Victor multiple times. These photos clearly show my wife in the company of Victor Lawson, CEO of Lawson Enterprises. Their meetings extend beyond professional boundaries, and I have reason to believe they are engaged in a personal affair. Charles stood to object. "Your Honor, these photographs are irrelevant to the case at hand. Just because two individuals are seen together does not imply an affair. The plaintiff is attempting to vilify my client without any substantial proof." Judge Reynolds nodded, considering the objection. Sustained. "Please focus on relevant evidence, Mr. Hargrove." I swallowed hard, frustration bubbling beneath the surface, but I knew I had to remain composed. "Understood, Your Honor. However, I do have more evidence to present, evidence that speaks directly to Mrs. Hargrove's intentions and actions." I motioned for Samuel, who stood and handed me the next set of documents. "Your Honor, I'd like to present my wife's credit card statements, which show unexplained expenses that coincide with her outings with Victor. She has been spending money on dinners and gifts that are inconsistent with our financial situation." Lara's face paled, and I could see the panic set in as Charles shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Objection, Your Honor. Credit card statements do not provide concrete evidence of infidelity, they simply show expenditures." Judge Reynolds narrowed her eyes at Charles. "Your point is noted, but I will allow Mr. Hargrove to present this information." "Continue, Mr. Hargrove." With a surge of adrenaline, I pressed on. "I believe that these expenses are related to the collaboration between my wife and Mr. Lawson. I have witnesses who can testify about the nature of their meetings." "Witnesses?" Charles sneered, attempting to undermine my credibility. "Who would you have in this courtroom to back your claims? Friends? Acquaintances? Actually, Your Honor, I'd like to call Nina Harper to the stand, I said, my voice steady. Lara's eyes widened in disbelief. Nina walked to the stand, her expression a mixture of reluctance and resolve. As she took her oath, I could see the conflict in her demeanor. I hoped I could coax the truth out of her. Ms. Harper, can you tell us about your relationship with my wife and Mr. Lawson? I began, leaning forward, eager to catch the slightest hint of dishonesty. Nina cleared her throat. Lara and I have been colleagues for a while. We've worked on several projects together. And what about her meetings with Victor Lawson? Were you aware of them? Yes, I was, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. They were discussing a potential collaboration, but it seemed, more than that, more than just business. I pressed, leaning closer. Nina hesitated, and I could see the fear in her eyes. I didn't think it was anything serious at first, but then I saw them together, and it looked personal. Personal how? Lara was affectionate with him, she stammered, her hands twisting nervously. They were laughing, touching, it felt wrong. Thank you, Miss Harper. I turned to the judge, letting the weight of Nina's words sink in. Your Honor, I have the right to present this evidence, which demonstrates the emotional betrayal I've suffered. Charles jumped up, visibly frustrated. Your Honor, this is purely speculative. Just because Miss Harper saw them together does not mean Mrs. Hargrove was unfaithful. Judge Reynolds held her hand up, silencing him. I will allow the testimony to stand for now. However, I expect all claims to be substantiated with further evidence. Nina's testimony had shifted the room's energy, and I could see Lara squirm in her seat, the facade of confidence beginning to crumble. I knew the time had come to drive my point home. Your Honor, I have one last piece of evidence to present, I said, standing tall. I pulled out a recording from the private investigator, the sound quality crisp and clear. This recording captures a conversation between Lara and Victor, discussing their plans and intentions. It reveals the true nature of their relationship. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as I played the recording, the audio filling the room. I can't believe we have to be so careful, Lara. If Daniel finds out about us, it'll ruin everything, Victor's voice echoed through the speakers. I know, but I can't help it. We're on the verge of something big, and I want this, Lara responded, her tone filled with desire and urgency. As the recording continued, I watched Lara's face drain of color. The weight of her own words hung in the air, and I felt a surge of triumph. When the recording finished, silence enveloped the courtroom. Judge Reynolds leaned forward, her gaze sharp. Mrs. Hargrove, would you like to respond to these claims? Lara hesitated, her voice shaky as she faced the judge. I didn't mean for it to get out of hand. Victor and I were working on a project together, and it got complicated. But I love my husband, love. I interjected, my voice ringing out. Is that what you call it, Lara? Love doesn't involve deceit or betrayal. She shot me a desperate look, tears brimming in her eyes. Daniel, please. I never meant to hurt you. The judge raised her hand again, silencing the rising tension. Let's stay focused on the evidence presented. Based on what I've heard today, it seems there's a clear breach of trust in this marriage. As the judge began to summarize the case, I felt a mix of relief and bitterness wash over me. This was not just about winning, it was about reclaiming my dignity, my life, and ensuring that Lara faced the consequences of her actions. After the judge delivered her ruling, I turned to Samuel, who was grinning widely. You did it, Daniel. You got her. I looked back at Lara, who was now staring at the ground, defeated. The realization washed over me. I had transformed from the trusting husband into a man who had fought back, and I would no longer allow myself to be a victim of betrayal. As I left the courtroom, I felt the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. Justice had been served, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next.